desperately need to get together and let our voices be heard.
This is Buffalo What's Next. I'm Jay Moran.
I'm Bridget Jaipal Valenza.
I'm Dave Debo.
And I'm Thomas O'Neill White.
After May 14th, how can we afford not to talk about race?
About education, about segregation, about humanity.
Since the dawn of this nation, racial violence has existed.
The way we have designed our society has a big hand in what occurred in that Tops Market.
The suburban area, everywhere, we must work and teach our children.
We need to make sure that we put more funding in our programs that help prevent gun violence and more money into art.
If we're going to have some real healing, we've got to have space to tell some uncomfortable truth.
Good morning. This is Dave Debo. Today is November 14th. It has been 6 months since the massacre at Tops Markets. A lot has happened since then, a lot of grief, a lot of activism, and it's really taken, I think, a course where it has changed people. We've looked at many times on this program to the degree that it has changed the community. But today I think we need to talk a little bit about the way it has changed certain people, the way it has sparked certain activism, advocacy. And one of the people that perhaps illustrates that the best, more than a lot of others in the community, is Mark Talley. Mark lost his mother, Geraldine, during the shootings, and since then he's taken the mantle of activism and created an organization that's taking some of those issues much further down the road. We will be looking at that through the balance of the program. But as I said, this is 6 months, and each day this program looks at the problems that were laid bare, and that focus, I think, could possibly obscure something else that happened. People lost lives. And as we look at their lives, we look at some of the 6 months of activism that their deaths inspired. Celestine Chaney was 65. Her granddaughter Kayla spoke with NPR's This American Life.
Kayla Jones says most of the words you'd use to describe a grandma apply to hers, Celestine Chaney. She could sew, was active in church, and loved to host. The family would often get together at Celestine's place for parties. Like, real parties.
Grandma had a bar. Like, she used to, like, at her house, a lot of people come over for, like, they have game night. You know, our game nights be, like, Uno and stuff, but their game nights is, like, gambling with, like, card games and stuff like that, and they're bingo. So that's why they, like, a lot of her sisters and her cousins and stuff, they come over and they do all that.
Friar Nicholas Spana was one of the individuals who spoke about her life at her funeral. Every time she talked with friends and family, he said, she was that light that shone through whatever darkness might be present. Andre McNeil went to the Tops to buy his 3-year-old grandson a birthday cake. This American Life found his TikTok videos where he'd lip-sync and dedicate songs to his wife.
The most TikTok thing Andre does in the 37 videos he posted, he lip-syncs to hip-hop and R&B classics. In one, he mouths along to Raheem DeVaughn's 2008 song, Customer. Andre looks right into the camera in these videos. The frame's super tight around his face and chest, and he emotes. He puts his hand to his chest and his temple and points to the camera, landing the lyrics with...
Pastor Tim Newkirk of GYC Ministries played basketball with McNeil.
He was a person that everybody knew in the community. He was a loving father, and he was an iconic brother. You know, and he was doing what he was supposed to do, staying in his neighborhood, better in his community, better in his neighborhood, with his family and his loved ones.
Catherine Massey was 72. One year when Governor Cuomo turned down her request for neighborhood improvements, he said her block club should take up the issue. She didn't have a block club, but she got some letterhead and sent it off to the governor as if one existed. Betty Jean Grant is a close friend.
She was a warrior. She is a warrior because we're going to keep her legacy alive. Kat adopted a school, Futures Academy. She bought the first uniform for those children at that school, one person using her own private money. She was able to get the New York State Department of Transportation to put the African signs on the concrete that faces the abutment that faces her house. She was able to help formed the Cherry Street Block Club and got that park at Jefferson Cherry Street. And the thing is that all those people who were massacred, the guy chose the best. If he could had selected people who had made a difference, who were very well loved and had done so much for the community. He couldn't chose anybody but them. It seemed like he chose the best of the best.
Her activism inspired Grant to push and rename a stretch of Cherry Street from Mortimer to Jefferson Avenue in her honor, and the Anderka welcome symbols like the ones that she put on the walls of the Kensington Expressway now grace the windows of the newly remodeled Tops on Jefferson Avenue. Margus Morrison was 52. He'd gone to the supermarket to buy chicken. Regina Patterson, the mother of his 3 children, spoke about him to Channel 2 News.
Beautiful guy, loving, caring. He took care of me and his daughter. He was our hero. There's nothing that he wouldn't do for us or his mom.
And after that, his cousin Michelle Spite, who also was a niece of another victim, Pearlie Young, spoke on Capitol Hill, part of the emerging activism after the deaths.
I will not stop until we take a candid look and keep the focus where it is. On May 14th, there were 10 victims who lost their lives and 3 who will never probably have the same capacity of life again. Until we put aside our differences of our political stance, be it Democrat or Republican, be it black or be it white, and focus on the matter that white supremacy is alive and well, that it need to be called what it is, that it is not some deranged, delusional person who acted this way, but he was motivated, he was educated, and he was fed a daily appetite of hate. This is what we need to look at, America. So I challenge you all behind the camera, since you have the power, that you change your articulation and that you focus on what the focus is. It shouldn't be on to the next shooting, the next event. Let's park right where we are until we see change.
Haywood Patterson, often known as Deacon Patterson, 67 years old. Penny Beckham runs the Plate of Love soup kitchen at his church. She tells This American Life that he would talk to anyone, regardless of why they were there.
Most volunteers, she said, don't spend a lot of time talking to the people who come in, some of whom are in a pretty bad way.
But Deacon Patterson would go in and he would talk to each individual. He wasn't judgmental. He let them know that their present state was not their expected end. And he would tell them about God's love and how God's love transformed him from who he was to who he was that day.
Misty Walker was a high school classmate of security guard Aaron Salter.
Walker says she graduated from Hutch Tech in 1984 with Salter, who went on to work for the Buffalo Police Department.
He survived almost 30 years of being a police officer in Buffalo. So to get killed at a grocery store on a second job as a security guard is ridiculous.
Buffalo police said Salter fired at and hit the gunman, but the gunman's tactical gear prevented the bullets from doing any damage.
Ruth Whitfield's death sparked calls for action, too, from her son Garnell Whitfield, speaking before Congress in these past 6 months.
My mother's life mattered. My mother's life mattered. And your actions here today will tell us how much it matters to you. I ask every one of you to imagine the faces of your mothers as you look at mine. And ask yourself, is there nothing that we can do? Is there nothing that you personally are willing to do to stop the cancer of white supremacy and the domestic terrorism it inspires? Because if there is nothing, then, respectfully, senators, you should yield your positions of authority and influence to others.
He talked more intimately about his mom on this program with WBFO's Thomas O'Neill White.
There's a hole in my world. My world is completely different than it used to be. You know, somebody just plucked probably the biggest piece of my life. Oh, took it away from me, took it away from my family. And didn't just take it from me. See, what you gotta understand is that, you know, yeah, it was my mom, but I got 2 sisters, I got a brother, you know what I'm saying? I got 4 children, I got 9 grandchildren, I got 4 great-grandchildren.
okay? I got a father who was completely dependent on her for his quality of life. And there's been innumerable people since this has happened that have come out of the woodwork and talking about what she meant to them. So it's just not a singular thing. You know, I'm sitting here and you're talking to me, and, you know, I gotta, you know, you gotta understand, it's much bigger than me. It's much bigger than all of us. It's much bigger than I mean, in Buffalo was different. You know, you got Uvalde, and I just left Washington, D.C. with the families from Uvalde, with the families from Highland Park. Just last week I was with them. And I've been with these families. I've been with the Tree of Life Synagogue families in Pittsburgh. I've been all of these places. And there's, you know, in Uvalde, the kids, you know, and all of the school shootings, like these kids, innocent kids. And it tugs at your heart. It's just a shame that these kids lose their lives. But what you got to understand in Buffalo is this. This was a white supremacist who killed people in our community that were long-standing pieces of our community. They had deep roots. They were well-connected. They touched a lot of people's lives. It's so impactful. They took our elders. It's like cutting the heart out of something. And it's different. And, you know, not to be unempathetic or unsympathetic. I just need to point out that difference between what happened there and what happened here.
Yeah, I think people who are not from Buffalo don't understand how tight-knit just the region is, but even more specifically, the black community within Buffalo. Everyone knows everyone. And if they're not your blood relative, they're just as close.
They're family, man. They're family. We are, we come from different experiences, but at the end of the day, we're black in Buffalo. Mm-hmm. And so there's a commonality there. We're family. We're all connected, man. I had a young lady call me out of the blue. This lady is, I think, 34, 35 years old. She reached out to me, and she told me the story about having met my mother when she was a young child, having visited our church one or two times maybe, and met my mother, and she's 30-something years old, and she's talking about how that changed her life, how that impacted her, man. You know what I'm saying? And she's blessing us now through her current position, what she's doing now by helping us care for our father. She wanted to do that because she met my mother when she was a child, man. You know what I'm saying? These are the kinds of stories, and these are the kind of things we're finding that we didn't even know about. We had no clue. We knew who our mother was to us, but until she was taken from us, and people started reaching out and started talking about their interactions with her, we didn't know. We didn't know how broad, how broad her influence was, how broad her reach was. Yeah.
Pearl Young was 77 and a great-grandmother. She taught Sunday school, and at the time of her death was still a substitute teacher in the Buffalo school system. Her life, like many of those lost, inspired activism that lives on today. Her daughter, Pamela Young, spoke before TV cameras on Capitol Hill.
My mother, who was massacred, murdered, and killed on May 14th by an angry person believing the replacement theory. But I'm also going to say that very same day, I called my very best friend, and I'm saying this to Congress, my very best friend who I called, her name is Mary Ann. Mary Ann is a Republican, a straight-up Republican, y'all. But guess what? She was empathetic toward me. And you know something I tell you guys today? Every single one of us have one thing in common. We cry the same tears. When your tears come down and my tears come down, if we put them in a bottle, they'd all be clear. They're not black or white, Republican or Democrat. They're the same tiers, and we need to get that out to people. I got one more thing to say, and then I'm going to sit down. Listen to me, I sound like I'm preaching, y'all. I promise you that just like that man traveled over 200 miles to massacre my mother and 9 others, I will travel throughout New York State, telling them that this is not who we are. We are better than this as Americans. Those 10 people who died were the best of Americans. If you had children, you would want your children to grow up to be like them. Civil activists, teachers. Those are the ones that he murdered and shot down that day. But I promise you one thing, every tear that I cry, because I'm going to go back to my hotel room and I'm going to cry tonight, but every tear I cry will be a fuel for action.
And Geraldine Talley, remembered by her son Mark.
She was funny. Me and her, we had our own special bond, own special humor. She was definitely a sweet woman. Life of the party may kind of be pushing it there, but she was definitely a sweet person, loved her family, loved her friends, loved her children. If she had it $20 on her, you needed $19, she would definitely give it to you.
And for the balance of this hour, Mark Talley is with us. Granted, there are many examples of people whose lives have changed and who have embraced new activism as a result of what happened on May 14th. Mark is perhaps, I don't want to say the biggest example, but a really concrete example. He, after the death of his mother, founded a group called Agents for Advocacy. We're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about the efforts that he's engaged in with that organization. And we'll talk, Mark, a little bit about the change, I think, that this whole situation has brought to you. Thanks for coming on in.
Absolutely. Pleasure to be here.
How you doing? I know that might be a difficult question to ask, but how are you?
All things considered, I'm doing pretty great. Can't complain about nothing.
This is one of the things, and I've talked to you before. Full disclosure, Mark actually worked on this program for a little bit at its start. You always seem to, in spite of the fact of having lost your mom, you've got a good attitude.
I just recently, I had a meeting with a gentleman from KeyBank, and we was just talking. He asked me the same thing, and I just told him. I mean, if I could give everything I have back to prevent this tragedy from happening, to have my mother back, I could, but unfortunately I can't. So like I would tell her all the time, I just have to man up and just keep going forward.
Tell me about the group Agents for Advocacy. Who are they? What do they do?
I was an organization I started because of the terrorist attack that happened on 5/14. Basically, my goal, my job, and the same thing I want my organization to do is just try to combat systematic racism and provide awareness on socio-economical, equitable, and equality issues. It's our larger goal to hopefully foster a reality someday in which one's race and one's socio-economic environment shouldn't determine one's future.
How do you do that? Is there training sessions? Is there just charitable activity in the community? Is it is it all of the above? What steps is the group taking?
Well, as of right now, we were just basically throwing a bunch of events in the community, from our community barbecue, which we fed over 700 people, our community back-to-school drive, in which we provided close to 500-600 children with backpacks, pens, pencils, calculators, notebooks. And along with our Thanksgiving drive we have coming up, Helpful Hands and Giving Thanks, in which we'll be working with Friends of the Night people, the African Heritage Food Co-op, along with assistance from United Healthcare, possibly NFTA, and Western, in which we're going to be having close to 500 meals prepared, along with 200 bags of produce to hand out at the Friends of the Night people location, along at the corner of Frankie Merriweather Library. But whether it's through all of those events, our primary focus in which we believe we could change all of this is through education. We believe if people had a better awareness of economics, socioeconomics, their environment, what's going on in the government, the political spectrum, the ideology these young children, these young adults are following. We believe all of that could have been prevented, and this attack would have never happened.
And at the same time, you are addressing the basic needs that exist in the community. You talked about the different donations. What do you see as the biggest need in the community right now?
Jobs, and well-paying jobs at that. I mean, asking a grown adult with possibly 2 kids to provide for themselves and their family off of making maybe, $14.50 an hour. I mean, that's hard. If we were just to round it up to $15 an hour on average, by the end of the year, that's close to maybe $30,000 to $32,000. Take away tax, you're left with around $26,000, $27,000 a year. It's hard for a grown adult, let alone one with a family to look after, but just a grown adult themselves to kind of fend for the year off, fend for the life off of.
You spoke of government. Talk about your advocacy work in that regard.
Well, when it comes to talking about Congress or trying to get in touch or get a hold with them to talk about the stuff in which our community needs, in which African Americans in general needs, I believe that's a waste of time, and it's insane to keep talking to them about it. The American Congress has a rich history of not doing anything or providing in this country for Black and brown people.
They parachute in, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounds like you're saying they parachute in after a shooting like this 6 months ago. They parachute in after Uvalde, but no real change. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely, and that same thing could be applied to the local Congress here in the area, and especially some of the biggest organizations and companies in the area as well. They come in, take their photo ops, get on the news. Because of tragedy, a lot of money is involved in tragedy. So they try to come in, collect the money, get pictures, get photo ops, get some publicity going, and just peace out.
After 6 months, has everyone left the scene? And by the scene, I don't mean literally the scene, but have the people who paid attention early on disappeared? All of them?
Yeah, all of them. All the fake ones. Some of the main people who were there when it first happened are still there, myself included. Pastor Giles, Back to Basic Ministries, Leonard Lane and Buffalo Fathers, Western New York Peacemakers, Thomas Buford and the Buffalo Urban League, even Reveria Octavia Denise Walden of Voice Buffalo. She's constantly there for any of the families if they need anything. So all the main original people who were there in the beginning are still there now.
But there are others that you wish were still involved.
Not necessarily, because you can see the fakeness in people easily, especially growing up, on the east side of Buffalo, Cold Springs, Maston Park area. You can easily just check you can just check their temperature, see if they're real or fake. And you have organizations like the Buffalo Bills who come in, they make what's the shirt, End Racism shirts, and they just come in, sell them to make a profit off the Black and brown community, and then they just leave. They put a athlete out there, a black brown athlete out there to talk on behalf of the families while they don't do anything. Unfortunately, they said I had to wear the shirt if I wanted to be on the field for the tribute for the families. And because I didn't wear the shirt, they barred me from attending the festivities. And it's ironic at the same time how they're trying to build this stadium off the backs of the taxpayers here in the community. And yet they don't want to help with those in the community who actually need it.
Didn't some of the T-shirt money go to the Compassion Fund? I think it did, right?
It did. A good portion went to the National Compassion Fund, but they've had to at least made close to several $1 million off these T-shirts, let alone how much they're making off their regular merchandise.
Similarly, and we talked about this before the program went on the air, there have been murals that sprung up all around town.
Yeah, I hate the murals a lot. I mean, nobody. It'll be one thing if they could just come ask the families this. Is it okay if we can put your mother's
likeness? Yeah.
Yeah.
They're using her pictures, basically. You say.
Absolutely, and most of the families, we aren't finding out about this until after the fact. And I really can't speak for none of the other families, but myself, it just makes me want to punch my fist into these murals, because it's like, can you at least ask, hey, is this okay? Or could they ask me what was something your mother would like? Was it the Cold Springs Memorial with the doves? Or it's the common picture people are painting of my mother wearing a purple shirt and hat? I hate all of it. If they would have just asked me what type of picture would I love for my mother to have, I would just say, whatever you make, can she at least be wearing red? Because red was her favorite color.
What do you feel about the renovated tops?
I feel nothing. I got a chance to go into it prior. I went in there a little bit afterwards, and it's just numbness. Kind of like when you just take 2 ice cubes and rub it on your ear to give yourself a home piercing. Is just numbness.
What bothers you the most 6 months on?
That people aren't trying to move on. People still want to wallow in self-pity, and people still just want to stay on step 1 and not take these actions to go to step 2 to prevent all of this stuff from happening. You have places like the Resiliency Center, who just came in off of getting state grant money to poster up in the east side and once again offer all of these therapy sessions, trauma sessions. When you have organizations like the Buffalo Urban League, Spectrum Health, Evergreen, even ECMC, who were offering this community those same sessions and classes immediately following 514. So it's like these companies want you to still just stay and wallow and be sad and cry constantly so they can feed off of that and make money from it.
Part of the reason I think why we wanted to have you here today is because you have taken it a step further, because you have founded an advocacy group. Is it? Go ahead. Tell me more about that, because to me that journey or that transition from grief to, okay, now we have to do something, is a huge story.
I believe it is. Like I said, I mean, the first 3 days after it happened, all I could do was just stay home. And immediately following, I was out there on Jefferson Avenue for the next 60 days, whether it be with World Central Kitchen, Buffalo Urban League, Buffalo Fathers, Western New York Peacemakers, Pastor Giles' organizations, Back to Basic Ministries. And I was just out there handing out clothing, non-perishable items, produce, food, or whatever, just as my way to cope. But once again, it's been 6 months later. I mean, you can't constantly just wallow in the self-pity, because then that's how you end up with a lot more mental health problems. And I think it's time for us as a community, us as a society, to do something so we can prevent this from happening. And unfortunately, our Congress and local government aren't really helping us that much.
At this point, I want to bring in your wife, Rosh. She's with us today, too. Thanks for being here. Talk about some of the things that have changed in Mark. Again, I don't want to overemphasize the journey, say, from grief to activism, but to me, that's an interesting, compelling story. How has he changed?
Thank you for having us, Dave. So he's more focused, driven. He's always had that passion to help and do for the community. However, with him dealing with the stages of grief, like he said, he did, have some emotional, feelings those first few days. But he wanted to really do something in honor of his mother, which I think that's what's driven him. So he's very compassionate and focused.
And do you think it'll... I'm talking about you, Mark, right, as if you're not in the room, but do you think it'll sustain?
Absolutely. Yeah, he's a quiet storm. So, absolutely. When he has his mindset on something, he's very driven, well-spoken, well-read individual. So, absolutely.
You, Mark, in a lot of ways, and again, you've worked on this program. We've seen you around the station before. You do seem to have a quiet persistence. You're not yelling and screaming, but there's still this undercurrent of, damn, we have to move forward.
I believe a powerful man has to be, in control of your emotions, especially if you're a black man as well in society. And, given my size, I'm like 6'6", 280, so, I can't just be walking down the street, angry, punching people. That'll be a recipe for me to get shot. And ironically, I would end up possibly getting shot doing that, while my mother's killer, he politely got taken down and sat in the back of the car.
All right. When we come back from this break, we'll talk more about community needs, about change, about Agents for Advocacy. It's a group founded by Mark Talley. He lost his mother, Geraldine, during the shootings 6 months ago today. We'll continue to talk about that as this program rolls on. It's Buffalo What's Next on WBFO.
The warrior tradition tells the inspiring, heartbreaking, and largely untold story of Native Americans in the U.S. military. Why would Indigenous men and women put their lives on the line for the very government that took their homelands?
A lot of people ask, why did you join the white man's war?
This is our home. This has always been our home. And part of the commitment to protecting and defending your home led to military service.
Hear stories of service and pain, of courage and fear in the warrior tradition, now streaming on YouTube.
Donations come in many forms: a sustaining membership, a one-time gift, even that extra vehicle you no longer need. Learn more about the advantages of donating a vehicle. Here's how. Go to WNED.org/vehicles.
This is Buffalo What's Next, where we have conversations with the community about moving forward. To have your voice heard, press the Talk to Us button on the WBFO app, and we'll work to get your questions and comments on the air. Join us on Twitter @WBFO or email us at news@WBFO.org. Together, we'll have the conversations that are needed. This is WBFO, your NPR station.
And this is Dave Debo continuing our discussion with Mark Talley. He's the founder of a group called Agents for Advocacy. He lost his mother, Ruth, during the shootings 6 months ago today. Mark, a lot of what the group is trying to do, you say, is bring attention to socioeconomic needs, to fill some of those needs. You have done benefits and that sort of thing. But you also mentioned earlier in the program that racism education is part of it. What can be done there?
That's $1 million question right there.
And it's huge, yeah. It's bigger, I think, than we have the time left to explore. But what do you picture? Let's break it down. What do you picture your group doing? And then maybe what do you picture the need beyond that being?
Oh, well, I graduated from Buff State with my economics degree, primarily focused in socioeconomics. Socioeconomics is considered a social science because it encompasses everything about a community, a society. Unfortunately, people only know about the community and society which they're in, and it's hard for them to relate to people in different communities and in different societies. I recently had a great opportunity to talk in my former high school, Canisius, and they just wanted me to talk to the freshmen there about the same thing, what my organization is doing and how I felt regarding 514. And while I was talking to them, I just asked them how many of them have ever, even breathed some air from the east side, and nobody raised their hands. So more than likely you have these affluent children, going back, to their affluent home with their affluent parents. And it's kind of hard to relate and to feel the struggle, by somebody who's never felt that struggle or pain. When I was working at ECMC, it's this organization or department, they're Brave. And Brave assisted the sexually assaulted female victims. And the majority of the staff were all female. And at the time, I didn't understand why. I figured, if you're trained in something, you could easily be able to help these women. And I was working in patient registration at the time. And I was able to go into a room and I was about to talk to one of these sexual assault victims. As soon as I get in there, she just starts screaming.
Because you're male?
Absolutely. And I did understand it then, but doing everything I'm doing now, I kind of understand it. I mean, somebody who just got sexually assaulted, presumably by a male, they don't want to see. And once again, this big male coming in the room to ask them some question after one of the most horrible times in their life. And unfortunately, in America, people don't want to experience the trauma that other people have to go through. I mean, I highly doubt somebody from East Amherst or Orchard Park would want to come stay in Cold Springs for a week. And you do have, other organizations who I'm trying to partner with, such as Slow Roll Buffalo and Explore Buffalo as well. Both these organizations, they do bicycle rides through areas, and they have tours through the predominantly east side areas as well. And some of the people in those communities don't like it because it's seen like it's a zoo exhibit. Like, you get to come down here, look at the black people, look at the poor areas, and you get a taste of what it feels like to be there.
Is the economic abandonment, is the disinvestment, to your mind, a direct offshoot of the lack of integration? Could we do better if more white guys from Orchard Park went through, and I'll use your analogy, went through the zoo exhibit?
Well, that's what happened with the Fruit Belt, and now all of this property is being bought up, forcing people out their homes and charging out, exorbitant rent prices. I mean, you have people who grew up there that was struggling to pay, maybe $1,500, $1,700 in rent. Now the people buying this property and building the condos are charging $2,500 in rent. And it's all if you can barely afford to pay, elderly people at that, if they could barely afford to pay $1,500, no way they can pay $2,500. And now you're forcing these people who've been in these communities, been living in these buildings for most of their life, they're having to leave due to the socioeconomic environment. Their status is going up higher. So yeah, you can say if more of these East Amherst or Orchard Park white guys and companies, if they were to go through, if more of them were to come over here to Maston or Cold Springs, it's a chance it may allow more money to come through the community, but it's also a chance that these property developers could also buy up all the property and kick everybody out.
What about the attitudinal change? If I see people on the east side as, people on the east side, I can otherize them. I can consider them different. I can do different things. How do we get over that basic barrier of integration? How do we get generically speaking, the white guy from Orchard Park to drive through the east side, maybe have a sandwich there for lunch and realize, hey, this is okay, and then take it the next step and realize, hey, this place needs more than it's got?
That's a question that America has been still trying to figure out. I mean, throughout history, whether integration has tried to happen, the majority of the time, the white people would just force the black people out. And when the black people would then start their own society, their own communities and prosperity, white people would still come in, for the lack of a better word, just massacre all of them as well.
I want to jump back to what you said earlier, that you were asked to speak to a class at Canisius High School. What did you say to them after you asked that question? How many of you have been to the east side? And no one shot up a hand.
I was just in a disbelief. I just said to myself, just wow. Like, I mean, Canisius is literally right there,
Yeah.
you know. Heck, you could probably put, well, not in the new map that they made, but you could send, they're down the block literally from the east side.
Yeah,
You know,
Delaware and Ferry, I'm thinking, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I remember going there. I was catching the 13 bus. I would get off at the Utica station and just walk to Canisius. And as I'm walking, as I'm getting off these buses, you could see the environment around you start changing. You stop seeing all of the used cars, the used, Chargers, the used Toyotas. As soon as you're going into this Canisius parking lot, you're seeing these, brand new Cadillac SUVs, just top of the line, German, Italian engineered cars. And that's when I really started to foster reality. Like, wow, everybody else doesn't live like me.
And yet, maybe this is where we can pivot back to a tribute to your mom. You were able to go to Canisius. She probably sacrificed to make that happen.
Yeah, she told me how much money it charged for me to go there, even with they gave me a half scholarship as well, how much it cost. And when I went back as well, they told me the price is close to around $24,000-$25,000 to go there. Fortunately, they did say that it's still one of the cheapest private schools to go to, given the amount of scholarships that they give. And they're definitely putting an effort to, make it more diverse as well. But just thinking back how my mom, how she took me out of Seneca, and I was able to go to Canisius, that was a lot of extra money that she fought for me to go to school too that she didn't have.
Agents for Advocacy is a group that will be doing a lot more. Do you see it eventually hosting programs that will simply just talk about race, try to get more blacks and whites at the table to have the discussion, whatever that discussion ends up being?
I plan on doing that immediately. Like I said, all the events I had this year just was to get branding out there, focus, letting people know who we are and what we're trying to be committing to. But come next year, immediately plan on having classes about business, racism, political science, government, socioeconomics, economics, credit building, everything, even just basic math and science classes. No, it's no secret. Education on the east side is lacking.
Yeah.
In terms of health, the east side has the highest rates of cancer, STDs, chronic and preventable illnesses, mental illnesses. Yet you have nobody talking or teaching them about health. So it's a perfect world for that socioeconomic group over there to be fighting a losing battle that they don't even know that they were in.
Do you think that those problems persist because simply no one has addressed them?
Absolutely. And people knew about it. That's how easy it was for this young adult man to scout the area.
So in that regard, and I know I'm talking to a man who lost his mother, but in that regard, is there good to come from the shooting? Is there light now? Is there attention now given to problems? And is it enough, or is that kind of what you're talking about earlier where, yeah, okay, people talked about it for a while and now 6 months later, okay, never mind?
And that's the bittersweet part of it. I constantly tell people, would Batman become Batman if he didn't lose his parents in front of him and all the good he was able to do? And that's kind of how I feel some of the time.
You're Batman. Mark Talley is with us. He's the founder of Agents for Advocacy. He's the son of Geraldine Talley, who was killed 6 months ago today in the top shooting. When we come back, we'll talk more about what the community needs and what he has seen in those 6 months. His wife, Rosh, is also here. We'll bring her back in. Much more to come. Stay with us. This is Buffalo What's Next on WBFO.
Check out the Our Town series produced by WNED PBS, but captured by community members on the Buffalo-Toronto Public Media YouTube channel.
Ellicottville is a town of variety, not only in what they have to offer, but the people. The Burlington community is becoming increasingly multicultural, and the library is reflecting that.
Parks and playgrounds have been what makes the town of Tonawanda a great place to grow up.
The series began in 2003, but it's making its debut on YouTube now. Although some of the businesses and people may have changed over the years, the spirit of these wonderful towns remain the same.
We just didn't realize what we had in our own backyard.
We need the next generation to protect it and carry on.
Learn about Jamestown, Burlington, Welland, East Aurora, and more than a dozen other beautiful communities in our region by watching the Our Town series now on YouTube.
I would live there.
This is Buffalo What's Next, where we have conversations with the community about moving forward. To have your voice heard, press the Talk to Us button on the WBFO app, and we'll work to get your questions and comments on the air. Join us on Twitter at WBFO or email us at news@wbfo.org. Together, we'll have the conversations that are needed. This is WBFO, your NPR station.
Exactly 6 months since the Tops Market shootings, we're looking today not only at the lives lost, but at some of the activism that has emerged since May 14th. And one of those who has moved forward with that activism is Mark Talley. He's the founder of Agents for Advocacy. He lost his mother, Geraldine, in the shootings. He's here to talk a little bit about what that organization has done and what he has seen in the community since that time. Education. Let's delve more deeply into that. Is that the area where you think the most has the biggest potential to make an impact?
Absolutely. Society still, kids are growing up at a lot faster rate. I mean, a 14-year-old, was considered a woman in her childbearing years, in the 1880s, 1890s. And since then, how people view children kind of started getting, lower and lower and lower until probably the rise of the internet age and the becoming for social media and everything that's happening. Now the average 13-year-old, I would say, would probably be more astute and smarter than the average adult, maybe growing up in the 1950s, 1960s, due to the fact that they have all the knowledge and history on their phone. Right now, the average 13 or 14-year-old is probably more computer literate than just the regular, average Joe 30-year-old.
And you spoke of it earlier in the program. The man accused of the shooting had certain things going on around him, exposure to social media. The replacement theory was in his head because of the education he got. Is that an area we need to reform? And we can talk about educational outcomes in a minute and what the community needs, but talk about particularly that aspect of educational reform. How do we change maybe the class in Binghamton, New York, that, takes that seed out of his head?
Once again, that's a $1 million question. You have adults here, learning stuff they never learned through TikTok, but this whole TikTok taught me how to do this. On one aspect, it's kind of funny. On the other aspect, it's like sad. Like you got to go to the internet to learn something you could have probably just learned in class. Our educational system definitely needs to be reformed because we're being taught stuff that we don't use. To this day, I still know that mitochondria is the powerhouse of a cell.
Sure.
I have never had to use this ever in my life. Learn how to cursive write. It's a big debate whether cursive should still be needed or not. I say it's not needed. People, adults, kids should be learning to do stuff that you're going to be doing in everyday society throughout the remainder of your life. People need to know the history, their history, and the world's history.
Are we teaching enough about socioeconomics and equity?
No, that's not even taught in high school. And depending on what you want to major in college, you're not even taught about that. I mean, you go from being a senior in high school, having to raise your hand to go use the bathroom, and now you're in college, having to having to pick out these loans with, absorbent interest rates. In the average 18, not even 18, heck, the average adult may not know what an APR is. Average adult may not even know what their credit score is or what's a good credit score at that. And now you're forcing these kids to make those decisions once they leave out of high school, never having to learn home economics, basic economics. What's a good credit score? What's a good interest rate? How can I go about buying a home down the line in the future? You have people not even knowing on American history. I mean, we get hammered home, not John F. Kennedy, the people in the Civil War. Unfortunately, I'm probably a bad example because I can't even really name the people anymore in the Civil War. Well, we get taught and hammered that home and forgot it. But the stuff we should be knowing, we don't get taught. You have this Common Core math being taught. And in my mind, like, does a 4th, 6th grader really need to know the intricacies of Common Core math at that age? I mean, unless you're getting into something, very, very tedious when you're growing up and going to a major in college. Was there finance, socioeconomics, business, math, maybe computer science? The average child really doesn't need to know the intricacies that much. People really just need to be taught history, because without the past history, if you don't know it, you're doomed to repeat it. And as we can see right now, we're still going through that, whether it's the whole Roe versus Wade situation or racism situation, how the shooter had the N-word on his gun. I was able to find out all of these far-right racist ideas through Twitch and 4chan. And unfortunately, it's sad seeing how it's not going to, education isn't going to be reformed. You have people congressmen in Florida and in the South teaching how slavery never happened, or instead of using slaves in the textbook, refer to them as endeared servants.
Yeah, right.
You having people that don't even want to teach the kids, stuff relating to 100 years ago. So if those kids grow up not knowing it, that's what they're going to teach their offspring.
Through the course of this program, oftentimes when we ask people what the community needs, we hear about education, which I think you've addressed. We hear about integration and segregation, which I think you've addressed. Let's take a moment here to talk about two others that have emerged as big discussion points in the past 6 months. Food apartheid, food desert, the fact that the Tops was the only grocery store within a certain geography there. Any thoughts what needs to be done there?
You just said it. We need more grocery stores in the east side.
How can that happen? What do you picture?
And that's up to our local congressman. Unfortunately, due to redlining, gerrymandering, it's not a lot of funding that's going to that area. I mean, I live in the Allentown district. I mean, we're not necessarily a rich, populous district, but I can at least go up and down Elmwood in Delaware, and we can start seeing the Lexington co-ops or the Girdles and something, in which all of these mom and pop shops and organizations and stores sell fresh food, fresh produce. The majority on the east side is now people buying produce from the gas stations and corner stores. And there's definitely nothing wrong with that. They're trying to do all they can to help, but you shouldn't be buying fresh produce from corner stores and gas stations.
Right.
And especially Mandela Market. I've known them now since they first went over there. And they definitely try as hard as they can. They're a corner store / grocery store, but it's too much. They shouldn't be in charge of having a supply, a small district with that much fresh produce. But once again, you can just go up and down Main Street, for that matter, from downtown all the way up until you get into Williamsville, and you can see the difference in funding and how it's going to be hard to compete. And we can only compete once the east side gets that funding But unfortunately, due to the systems in place, that funding is it won't be coming.
Talk to me about housing. Home ownership rates are low on the east side. Available good housing is low. There's always issues about health and lead. What silver bullet? And I hate to even say silver bullet because so many of these problems require a solution that is multifaceted. But what do you see making a difference there, if anything?
It's hard to see anything making a difference. That's why I'm just trying to do my best with education. I mean, once again, people from low socioeconomic neighborhoods statistically come from a single-family environment and are in poor health with little to no college experience. So once again, like I said earlier, if you have all those three things working against you, and you're making $14.50 an hour after taxes, $27,000 a year. Let's say even without the two kids, your chances of buying a house, that it's really no chance. It's just not happening. I mean, for close to the past 6 or 7 years, when I didn't even know about credit score, I've been fighting to get my credit score up, and it's finally able to get in the 700s. But even with that, I mean,
for you, it really does everything circle back to socioeconomics.
Yeah, even with that, these mortgagers, statistics based off of mortgagers, they look at the credit score, they look at your color, and if you're black, even with a high credit score, you're still less likely to get a mortgage loan compared to somebody who's white with an average credit score.
You're a pretty modest guy. Who else is doing this kind of work? Talk about others who have been, during these past 6 months, on the journey from grief to advocacy.
Well, you name one of the others. Cornell Whitfield, he's out there, fighting Congress, trying to get all of this, all the work done to help out here in the east side. You have Thomas Buford. I've had a chance to talk to him many occasions. He's fighting as well.
President of the Urban League.
Yes, sir. He's definitely out here fighting as well to do all he can do. Pastor Giles, his organization, Back to Basic Ministries, Leonard Lane, Western New York Peacemakers and Buffalo Fathers, they're out there consistently, whether on Jefferson or Broadway, trying to help out in the community, whether giving people fresh fruit, just regular non-perishables and everyday items, along with clothing.
I think, though, in some part, and I'm not denigrating the good work that people like Thomas Buford or Lenny Lane are doing, but to some degree, I think they were already activists. This changed people. This changed people like you from being on the sidelines to realizing that we got a problem.
Absolutely. Everything I know and wanted to do, I'm basically just been learning from them. Also, can't forget Jillian Hainsworth. She's been doing this. Now she's fighting the fight at with the Buffalo Bills and the stadium issues. So everything I see that they're doing, I'm aspiring to be. So when people say I'm one of the young leaders here in the area trying to make Buffalo better than what it is, for me to be in the same breath as all the before named people, I just feel that it's an honor. But unfortunately, it's still a lot of fighting we all have to do.
Closing moments here. Are you optimistic?
I wish I could say I am. I kind of have a pessimistic view of society based off the history of which society has shown us.
So you continue to try, but you're not certain that we'll make it.
Well, Caesar, we try, like I said, just laying a pile of, depression and sorrow.
Mark, as we close, anything else that you really needed to let the world know here on the 6-month anniversary?
Coming up, Agents for Advocacy, we're having our Thanksgiving festival, Thanksgiving event, helpful hands, and giving thanks. If you know anybody, whether yourself, your family, that wants to come on by, you need a hot meal, you need any non-perishable clothing, any food items, whatever you need, just please feel free to stop by on Thanksgiving Day, 11:30 till 1 p.m. at Friends of the Night People location, and from 3 to 5 p.m. at the corner of East Utica in Jefferson.
All right, that is all we have time for. This is WBFO and WBFO HD1 Buffalo, WOLN Olean, and WUBJ Jamestown. I'm Dave Debo. Thanks for listening today.